At sunrise, 4 Japanese battleships appeared beyond the rain off Samar. 6 heavy cruisers followed them, 2 light cruisers and 11 destroyers completed the formation. Their guns could destroy an escort carrier with only several accurate hits. Between that force and the vulnerable American landing area stood Taffy Three. Its 6 small carriers were built for supporting troops and hunting submarines. They were not designed to fight battleships. 3 destroyers and 4 destroyer escorts formed their surface screen. The destroyer Johnston held the northern edge of that protective formation. Her captain was Commander Ernest Evans. At about 6:45, anti-aircraft bursts appeared on the northwestern horizon. Japanese ships were firing at an American patrol aircraft. Radar contacts and intercepted transmissions confirmed that something large was approaching. Then colored columns of water rose beside the American carriers. Japanese shells carried dyes that helped different ships identify their own salvos. The colors made the danger unmistakable. Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague first turned his carriers toward the east. He hoped to launch every available aircraft before running for protective weather. His pilots carried weapons intended for ground support or submarine patrols. Some had small bombs, some carried depth charges, others had only machine gun ammunition they launched anyway. Evans faced a different problem. Johnston possessed 5 5-inch guns and 10 torpedoes. Her armor offered almost no protection against cruiser or battleship fire. Her maximum speed gave her one useful advantage. She could close the enemy before the Japanese formation fully organized itself. That advantage would disappear if Evans waited. No attack order had reached Johnston. Evans could remain with the carriers and produce smoke. He could wait for Sprague to coordinate a torpedo attack. He could also turn toward the enemy immediately. Each choice carried a severe risk. Remaining close preserved the screen but surrendered distance and initiative. Waiting promised coordination but allowed the Japanese ships to improve their firing positions. Attacking alone exposed Johnston to nearly every heavy gun ahead. Evans did not know the complete Japanese plan. He could not see Kurita's uncertainty or the confusion inside center force. He did not know whether American battleships were coming from the south. He knew what his bridge could observe. A vastly stronger force had surprised slow carriers in open water. The enemy was closing. No powerful American surface force was visible. Evans turned Johnston toward the Japanese fleet. The decision came before any general order to attack. It was not a theatrical charge toward certain destruction. It was a calculated attempt to exchange distance for disruption. Evans needed his torpedoes to force enemy ships away from the carriers. He also needed smoke and rain to complicate Japanese fire control. Most importantly, he needed time. Johnston accelerated through the shell splashes. Evans ordered a zigzag approach toward the leading Japanese cruisers. The ship began making smoke while closing the range. Japanese lookouts could not easily identify the small attacker. They were already struggling to understand the force before them. They had mistaken escort carriers for much larger fleet carriers. That error mattered. Kurita believed he had encountered a powerful American carrier group. Aggressive resistance could reinforce that belief. Evans could not know this. His decision rested on a simpler calculation. If Johnston remained beside the carriers, Japanese gunfire would keep its rhythm. A torpedo attack could break that rhythm. It could force turns, it could separate ships, it could make an organized pursuit become a series of individual reactions. Johnston was one destroyer against an entire battle fleet. Yet Evans was not trying to defeat that fleet alone. He was trying to interrupt its decisions. Johnston's approach depended on reaching torpedo range before Japanese gunners found her. The distance was still dangerous. Her 5-inch guns could harass cruisers but could not penetrate battleship armor. Her torpedoes were the real threat. Evans ordered the forward guns to open fire at extreme range. Their target was the leading Japanese heavy cruiser Kumano. Johnston fired rapidly while continuing her approach. The destroyer presented a narrow target from ahead. Her frequent course changes further complicated Japanese range calculations. Shells landed around her, throwing water over the decks. Evans used those splashes as information. A salvo revealed where Japanese gunners expected Johnston to be. He maneuvered toward recently struck water before the next shells arrived. The method was not protection. It was an attempt to remain unpredictable inside a measured firing pattern. One direct heavy caliber hit could still end the attack. A rain squall offered temporary concealment. Johnston entered it, then emerged much closer to the Japanese formation. The approach had consumed precious minutes. Kumano led a column of heavy cruisers on the American northern flank. The cruisers were positioned to overtake the slower escort carriers. Their speed made them the immediate threat. Johnston closed to roughly 10,000 yards. That distance offered a reasonable torpedo opportunity against a fast surface target. It also placed the destroyer within devastating Japanese gun range. Evans ordered a turn to bring the torpedo mounts to bear. Johnston launched all 10 torpedoes toward the cruiser column. She then reversed course and raced back toward the American carriers. The torpedoes forced immediate reactions. Kumano turned sharply to avoid the spreading tracks. At least one torpedo struck near her bow. The explosion tore away a large section of the cruiser's forward hull. Kumano lost speed and fell out of the pursuit. The cruiser Suzuya maneuvered near her damaged sister. That movement disrupted the Japanese formation. 2 heavy cruisers were no longer pressing directly toward the carriers. The effect exceeded the damage to a single ship. Johnston had converted 10 torpedoes into distance and delay. The Japanese ships had to respond to weapons already moving through the water. Their numerical superiority could not cancel that physical requirement. Evans now faced the cost of his decision. Johnston had fired every torpedo she remained inside the Japanese fleet's effective gun range. The rain squall offered the shortest path toward concealment. Evans steered for it while making smoke. Japanese shells followed the retreating destroyer. Several missed, then Johnston was hit. Heavy shells smashed into the bridge and engineering spaces. Power failed across parts of the ship. The steering engine stopped working. Evans was wounded. 2 fingers were lost from his left hand. Fragments tore his clothing and damaged the bridge around him. Johnston slowed dramatically. Sailors shifted steering control to the fantail. Communication between the bridge and the rudder position became improvised and difficult. The destroyer reached the rain for several minutes. The weather hid her from direct observation. Repair teams worked while the battle continued outside. They restored enough power for Johnston to move again. Steering remained unreliable. The ship could no longer fight as a fully functioning destroyer. Yet the first attack had already changed the geometry of the pursuit. Kumano was crippled. Suzuya had been drawn away from the most direct chase. Other Japanese ships had turned or adjusted formation. The carriers had gained minutes. Their aircraft had gained time to attack. The American screen had gained an example it could follow. Evans' action also revealed that the Japanese advance was vulnerable to close attacks. Their enormous guns did not guarantee a clean firing solution. Their ships still needed space to maneuver against torpedoes. Sprague soon ordered a coordinated attack by the remaining destroyers. Hull and Heermann turned toward the enemy. The smaller destroyer escort, Samuel B. Roberts, would eventually join them. Johnston's unsupported decision was becoming a collective tactic. This did not make the situation safe. Japanese battleships and cruisers continued closing from several directions. Shells were still falling among the carriers, but the pursuit was no longer uncontested. Kurita's commanders now faced smoke, aircraft, torpedoes, rain, and conflicting movements. Evans had entered the fight to disrupt one firing sequence. His attack helped create something larger. It created uncertainty. Sprague's general torpedo order sent Hull and Heermann toward the Japanese formation. Johnston was retreating through rain when Evans saw them approaching. His ship was damaged and nearly powerless. Her torpedoes were gone. Evans turned back with them. This second decision differed from the first. Johnston could no longer deliver the weapon that justified a close approach. She could offer gunfire, smoke, and another target. The American destroyers did not advance in a clean formation. Smoke and rain restricted visibility. Different ships selected different targets as Japanese columns spread around the carriers. Hull headed toward the battleships. Heermann maneuvered between friendly ships while preparing her torpedo attack. Johnston emerged from concealment and fired at nearby Japanese vessels. The small force created threats across several bearings. Japanese commanders had to avoid torpedoes without colliding with one another. Their pursuit became increasingly fragmented. Yamato carried the heaviest guns in the battle. Her armor made American 5-inch shells almost irrelevant. Her enormous size did not make her immune to torpedoes. Heermann launched against the battleship column. The approaching tracks forced Yamato to turn away. For several minutes, the Japanese flagship ran north between parallel torpedo paths. The maneuver carried Kurita away from the American carriers. It also separated him physically from ships continuing the pursuit. The flagship remained powerful, but temporarily moved in the wrong direction. This was the tactical value Evans had recognized. A torpedo did not need to strike to influence a decision. Its target had to respect the possibility. Hull paid heavily for creating that possibility. Large shells struck her repeatedly. Steering, communications, and weapons failed as she continued fighting. Heermann also drew concentrated fire. At one point, she passed dangerously close to Johnston inside the smoke. The confused battlefield offered little room for careful coordination. Sprague then committed the smaller escorts. The destroyer escorts were slower and carried only 3 torpedoes each. Their 5-inch guns could not match Japanese heavy weapons. They turned toward the enemy anyway. Samuel B. Roberts accelerated beyond her normal sustained speed. Her crew prepared for a close attack against the cruisers. The American tactics now depended on overlapping forms of disruption. Destroyers launched torpedoes. Escort vessels fired rapidly. Carrier aircraft attacked from above. Some aircraft carried bombs unsuitable for armored warships. Others had already released their weapons. Pilots continued making attack runs to distract Japanese gunners. Several aircraft made empty passes. From the ships below, Japanese observers could not always know which planes remained armed. Every dive demanded attention. Smoke further distorted the battle. The escorts generated thick screens between the enemy and the carriers. The carriers also made smoke while maneuvering through shellfire. Japanese ships sometimes fired at incomplete silhouettes. Range estimates became uncertain. Targets disappeared, then reappeared on unexpected courses. The Americans were not executing one elegant plan. They were combining several imperfect actions under extreme pressure. Each action imposed another decision on the Japanese force: turn away from torpedoes, shift fire toward a destroyer, engage an attacking aircraft, search through smoke for the carriers, avoid another Japanese ship making its own evasive turn. These decisions consumed time. They also reduced the concentration of Japanese firepower. A fleet designed to overwhelm its target was fighting as scattered groups. Kurita still held the material advantage. Most of his battleships remained operational. Several cruisers continued advancing close enough to fire effectively. The escort carrier Gambier Bay began taking serious damage. Her limited speed made escape increasingly difficult. Other carriers suffered hits and near misses. The American screen was also being destroyed. Hull could no longer maintain her attack. Samuel B. Roberts would soon face cruisers at close range. Johnston remained in the smoke near the threatened carriers. Her speed had partly recovered. But her steering system was fragile. Damage had reduced her firepower. Evans now used the ship less like a torpedo attacker. He used her as a mobile obstruction. Johnston fired whenever a Japanese ship emerged through the haze. The first charge had delayed one cruiser column. The expanding defense now delayed an entire fleet. Yet delay alone could not guarantee survival. The carriers still needed the Japanese commander to reach the wrong conclusion. The escorts were helping him reach it. Kurita entered the battle with an incomplete picture of the American force. His ships had crossed San Bernardino Strait during the night. No American surface force challenged them there. At dawn, their route toward Leyte Gulf appeared open. Then lookouts reported carriers on the horizon. Japanese officers identified them as large fleet carriers. Their supporting ships also appeared more powerful than they were. The mistake was understandable from Kurita's position. Distance, poor visibility, smoke, and combat pressure distorted scale. American escort carriers shared the general outline of larger carriers. Kurita also had reasons to expect powerful opposition. American carrier aircraft had attacked center force in the Sibuyan Sea. The battleship Musashi had been sunk during those attacks. Kurita had briefly reversed course before resuming his advance. His force had already endured damage, confusion, and conflicting reports. He did not know where every American carrier group had gone. When Taffy Three appeared, Kurita believed he had found an important target. He ordered a general attack instead of forming a coordinated battle line. Individual Japanese divisions accelerated into the pursuit. That order favored speed, it sacrificed control. Center force was still changing from its night formation. Ships occupied positions unsuitable for a clean daylight engagement. The general attack magnified that disorder. Fast cruisers surged ahead. Battleships followed on different courses. Destroyers remained too distant to deliver an early coordinated torpedo strike. Kurita expected superior speed and gunfire to settle the battle. Against actual fleet carriers, aggressive pursuit could prevent aircraft launches. Against escort carriers, it should have produced an even quicker result. Instead, the Americans attacked. Johnston's charge was only one part of the resistance. Its importance came from when and where it occurred. Evans struck before the Japanese pursuit could become orderly. Kumano's damage removed the leading cruiser from the chase. Suzuya's movements further disturbed the cruiser column. Other ships altered course to avoid torpedoes. American smoke then concealed the carriers. Aircraft arrived repeatedly from different directions. Additional surface attacks followed before Japanese formations recovered. To Kurita, these actions did not resemble the defense of a weak escort group. They appeared consistent with a major carrier force fighting desperately. Reports of damage and torpedo threats reinforced that interpretation. The Japanese also overestimated some American ships. Destroyers could be mistaken for cruisers through smoke and rain. Destroyer escorts appeared more dangerous when they attacked at close range. American gunfire added to the confusion. Rapid 5-inch fire struck exposed positions and disrupted communications. It could not sink a battleship through armor, but it could still damage equipment. Japanese ships often selected the nearest threat. That was a rational response for each captain. Collectively, it drew fire away from the carriers. A destroyer approaching with torpedoes could not be ignored. An aircraft beginning a dive could not be ignored. A carrier visible through smoke remained the primary objective. These competing dangers fractured attention. The Japanese advantage existed in total firepower. It weakened whenever that firepower was divided among many temporary targets. Evans had not known Kurita's assumptions when he turned toward the fleet. He could not design his attack around Japanese misidentification. He could only make Johnston look dangerous enough to demand a response. That response became part of a larger false picture. The harder the small escorts fought, the stronger their force appeared. Their aggression suggested support that did not exist. Kurita still believed powerful American units might arrive. He had received no reliable reconnaissance proving the surrounding sea was empty. His position near Leyte remained exposed to further air attack. Time therefore mattered to both commanders. Sprague needed enough time to save his carriers. Kurita needed enough certainty to continue toward Leyte Gulf. The American attacks gave Sprague minutes. They denied Kurita certainty. Johnston's first turn could not decide the battle by itself. No single destroyer forced center force to retreat. The outcome emerged from many attacks. Navigational problems, damage, and mistaken assessments. But Evans acted at the moment when Japanese momentum was most vulnerable. He introduced a torpedo threat before that momentum became organized. Once broken, it never fully returned. Johnston emerged from the smoke to find the battle moving around her. The original formations had largely disappeared. American carriers were scattered across the sea. Japanese ships approached them from several directions. Evans could no longer depend on normal bridge control. Damage had disrupted communications throughout Johnston. Orders sometimes passed through sailors positioned along exposed decks. The steering team aft responded to shouted or relayed instructions. Smoke obscured visual signals. Gunfire made spoken commands difficult to hear. Despite these limitations, Johnston continued searching for immediate threats. A Japanese battleship appeared through the haze. The destroyer fired at its upper structures while passing at dangerous range. 5-inch shells could damage exposed equipment. They could strike directors, antennas, and unprotected gun crews. They could not defeat the battleship's main armor. Evans was using every functioning weapon to complicate Japanese action. His targets were chosen for their immediate effect. Damage mattered less than interruption. A Japanese cruiser was firing against the escort carrier Gambier Bay. The carrier had fallen behind the other American ships. Her speed and thin hull left her dangerously exposed. Johnston directed fire toward the cruiser. The destroyer could not shield Gambier Bay physically. It could force Japanese gunners to divide their attention. Evans maneuvered between threats whenever his damaged steering permitted. Each turn risked another mechanical failure. Each burst of gunfire revealed Johnston's position. Gambier Bay continued receiving hits. Water entered the ship fires and structural damage reduced her ability to escape. The carrier's loss was becoming unavoidable. Johnston could not reverse damage already inflicted. Evans instead searched for the next threat to the surviving carriers. Japanese destroyers were moving forward. They had preserved their torpedoes during the earlier stages of the battle. If they reached a favorable launch position, the carriers faced another disaster. 7 destroyers appeared in 2 groups through smoke and rain. Their speed allowed them to close rapidly. Their torpedoes could travel farther than the American weapons. Johnston turned toward them. The decision again placed a damaged ship between the carriers and a stronger force. Johnston had no torpedoes remaining. Several guns were disabled or operating under severe difficulty. Her surviving guns opened fire on the leading Japanese destroyer. Shell splashes and hits disrupted the approaching formation. Other American ships and aircraft added their own attacks. The Japanese destroyers launched torpedoes from long range. They then turned away rather than continuing directly toward the carriers. Their attack lost the advantage of a closer, more controlled approach. American ships observed the torpedo tracks. Carriers turned to avoid them. Defensive gunfire targeted the approaching weapons where possible. The torpedoes failed to produce the decisive result Japan needed. Their range, target maneuvers, and battlefield confusion reduced their effectiveness. Another organized threat had been broken into a hurried action. Johnston's gunfire was not solely responsible. Smoke, aircraft, and fire from other escorts also influenced the Japanese commanders. But Evans had again placed his ship where hesitation could be created. The pattern remained consistent. Johnston could not destroy every threat. She could make each threat act earlier, turn wider, or fire less accurately. That was now the destroyer's tactical purpose. Her value no longer depended on survival. It depended on the reactions she could still impose. The cost was accumulating. Japanese ships began concentrating on Johnston. Heavy shells struck near the waterline and across the upper decks. One engine stopped. Electrical systems failed. More guns fell silent. The ship slowed as water entered damaged compartments. Her smokescreen became thinner and less reliable. She could no longer disappear whenever enemy fire found her. Evans had spent Johnston's speed during the first attack. He had spent her torpedoes against Kumano. He had spent much of her remaining mobility defending the carriers. Only her guns and crew remained. The Japanese fleet had not reached Leyte Gulf. Most of Taffy Three's carriers were still moving south. Aircraft continued, returning to attack with whatever weapons they could obtain. Johnston had helped purchase that time. Now the bill was coming due by about 9 o'clock. Johnston could barely maintain her position. Enemy shells had damaged both machinery and weapons. The destroyer speed fell sharply. Japanese ships could now overtake her. Evans continued directing fire from the ruined bridge area. Smoke and spray concealed parts of the ship. They could not hide her slow movement. Japanese destroyers closed from the surrounding haze. Cruisers also found the range. Shells struck Johnston from several directions. The remaining engine stopped. The ship lost forward motion. Steering orders no longer mattered. Evans gave the order to abandon ship. Sailors released life rafts and flotation nets. Others entered the water from the damaged decks. There was no orderly rescue beside Johnston. The larger battle still surrounded them. American ships were escaping under fire. Johnston rolled and began sinking. Hundreds of sailors entered the sea. Many would remain there for roughly 2 days before rescue arrived. Evans was seen in the water after leaving the ship. He did not return. His final fate was never established with certainty. Johnston's loss can make the first decision appear predetermined. A lightly armored destroyer attacked battleships and was eventually sunk. That sequence encourages a simple story of sacrifice. The tactical reality was more complicated. Evans did not choose between safety and destruction. Safety was already disappearing when Japanese shells reached the carriers. Remaining in formation offered no guarantee of survival. Japanese cruisers were faster than the escort carriers. Their gunfire could eventually destroy the entire group. Evans instead chose where Johnston's limited combat power would be spent. He used speed before enemy fire could remove it. He used torpedoes before their launch system could be damaged. He attacked the leading cruiser column while it was still organizing. That timing gave the torpedoes greater influence than a later launch might have achieved. Kumano's damage was only the most visible result. The attack also forced turns. It divided formations. It placed smoke between Japanese gunners and their targets. Most importantly, it demonstrated an available response. Other escorts could not match Japanese firepower. They could create multiple close threats that demanded immediate action. Sprague later coordinated that response across his screen. Howell, Heerman, and Samuel B. Roberts made their own attacks. Their actions cannot be reduced to Evans' example alone. Each commander responded to orders, position, and immediate danger. Each ship created different tactical effects. The collective defense mattered more than any single vessel, yet Johnston's first turn came before that collective defense existed. Evans acted without waiting for a complete picture. He accepted the risk of attacking alone, because delay favored the pursuers. This was not blind aggression. The decision matched Johnston's surviving advantages. She had speed, torpedoes, smoke, and temporary concealment from rain. Those advantages were perishable. Minutes later, shell damage could remove all four. Evans spent them while they remained available. The Japanese force retained overwhelming strength after Johnston sank. 4 battleships still represented enormous destructive power. Several cruisers and destroyers remained capable of fighting. But their attack had lost direction. Ships were scattered across a wide area. Some were damaged, others were recovering from evasive maneuvers. Japanese commanders reported sinking ships they had not actually destroyed. They also overestimated the strength of the American opposition. The battle appeared more successful and more dangerous than it truly was. Kurita now had to decide whether to reorganize and continue. His original objective lay beyond Taffy Three. American transports and landing support ships remained inside Leyte Gulf. Reaching them required another commitment. Center Force would need to reform after hours of confused combat. It would also remain exposed to repeated American air attacks. Johnston was gone before that decision was made. Evans never learned how Kurita would resolve it. The destroyer's tactical effect survived her. The delay she helped create had become uncertainty inside the Japanese command. That uncertainty was approaching its decisive moment. Shortly after 9 o'clock, Kurita ordered his ships to break off the pursuit. The order did not immediately send Center Force home. Kurita first attempted to gather his scattered ships. He still considered moving toward Leyte Gulf. From his flagship, the battle no longer resembled the opening encounter. The American carriers were disappearing southward. Smoke and rain concealed their exact positions. Japanese cruiser divisions had suffered serious disruption. Other cruisers had received bomb, torpedo, or gunfire damage. Chokai had fallen out of action. Suzuya was also in severe trouble. Chikuma's condition deteriorated after repeated attacks. Reports reaching Kurita were incomplete. Some arrived late. Others overstated American strength or Japanese success. He believed his ships had encountered fast American carriers. That identification shaped every later calculation. A weak escort group appeared to be part of a larger carrier threat. Kurita also lacked reliable information about the wider American fleet. Aircraft continued attacking Center Force. Their persistence suggested nearby carrier support. Japanese reconnaissance had not provided a clear operational picture. Kurita could not confidently locate the American fast carriers. He could not know how quickly heavier forces might reach him. Fuel also limited his freedom. Center Force had crossed a long approach under constant threat. Every hour near Leyte increased the difficulty of returning safely. The original Japanese plan required several forces to converge. That coordination had already collapsed. The southern force had been destroyed in Surigao Strait. The northern carriers had drawn the American Third Fleet away. Kurita did not possess a complete understanding of that success. He knew only fragments of a battle spread across hundreds of miles. Leyte Gulf remained the assigned objective. The transports there represented an important target. Reaching them now required moving through uncertain waters after losing formation. Kurita briefly turned toward the Gulf. Then new information redirected his attention northward. A report suggested an American carrier group lay in that direction. The report was inaccurate. For Kurita, it offered a target consistent with his mission to attack enemy naval forces. It also appeared to promise contact without entering the confined Gulf. Center Force moved north. The opportunity against the light anchorage faded. Historians continue debating why Kurita ultimately withdrew. No single explanation resolves every surviving order and recollection. Fatigue, losses, faulty reports, fuel, and fear of air attack all mattered. The resistance from Taffy Three was therefore one cause among several. It did not physically defeat every Japanese ship. It changed the conditions under which Kurita evaluated his choices. At first contact, Kurita saw surprised carriers within reach. After 2 hours, he saw scattered ships, damaged cruisers, and continuing air attacks. He also believed he faced a stronger force than was actually present. The American escorts had helped build that impression. Their attacks made the approach costly. Their torpedoes repeatedly forced powerful ships away from the objective. Evans' first attack mattered inside this accumulation. It damaged the leading cruiser. Before Japanese fire could eliminate Johnston's offensive power, it helped turn a pursuit into a sequence of defensive reactions. That sequence bought time for more aircraft to arrive. It allowed more smoke to spread. It enabled other escorts to reach effective attack positions. Cause and effect remained shared across the battlefield. No responsible account can claim Johnston alone turned Kurita away. Nor can the destroyer's contribution be measured only by ships sunk. Tactical success sometimes appears as movement rather than destruction. An enemy turns north instead of south. A cruiser loses position. A commander waits for information that never becomes clear. By late morning, Center Force was withdrawing from the area. The surviving American carriers no longer faced Japanese battleship fire. The route into Leyte Gulf had closed behind Kurita. The landing force survived the immediate surface threat. American operations on Leyte continued. Japan had lost its best opportunity to attack the anchorage. Evans had never seen that larger outcome. His decision had been made from one bridge under falling shells. He had chosen to attack because waiting offered the enemy control. Several hours later, the enemy no longer controlled the battle. To judge Evans' decision, fairly the clock must return to first contact. Later knowledge makes the Japanese force appear clearly vulnerable. Kurita eventually withdrew. Several cruisers were lost or disabled. American aircraft attacked almost continuously. None of that was guaranteed when Johnston turned northwest. Evans could see gunfire from a vastly superior force. He knew the carriers behind him were slow and lightly protected. He knew Johnston carried only one full torpedo attack. He did not know the Japanese had mistaken the carrier's identity. He did not know Kurita's formation was disordered. He did not know how Japanese commanders would react to aggressive resistance. 3 practical choices existed. The first was to remain close to the carriers. Johnston could make smoke and engage aircraft or approaching destroyers. This choice preserved the defensive screen. It also allowed Japanese cruisers to close without facing an early torpedo threat. Their greater speed would steadily reduce the range. Johnston might then launch under heavier fire from a worse position. The second choice was to wait for Sprague's orders. A coordinated attack could combine several torpedo spreads. It could force more Japanese ships to maneuver simultaneously. Coordination required time and communication. Both were already failing. Smoke, shellfire, and rapidly changing bearings made formation control difficult. The third choice was immediate independent attack. It surrendered mutual support. Johnston would attract concentrated fire before other escorts joined her. Yet this choice used the destroyer's weapons at their highest remaining value. Speed allowed Johnston to close. Rain offered concealment. The enemy formation had not settled into an efficient pursuit. Evans chose the third option. The decision carried no assurance of success. Torpedoes could miss Japanese shells, could disable Johnston before launch. The cruiser column might continue without meaningful delay. Calculated risk does not mean low risk. It means the possible result justifies exposure under the available conditions. Evans accepted extreme danger to impose delay on a force threatening 6 carriers. His timing was central. A destroyer waiting beside a burning carrier would hold little initiative. A destroyer approaching before the enemy organized could shape the next movement. The attack also exploited a difference between firepower and freedom of action. Japanese battleships possessed enormous firepower. They could not fire effectively while constantly maneuvering around friendly ships and torpedoes. Every forced turn reduced closing speed. Every obscured target interrupted fire control. Every ship avoiding a torpedo disturbed another ship's position. Johnston could not match Japanese weapons. Evans attacked the process that allowed those weapons to work together. This distinction explains why damage totals tell only part of the story. Kumano's shattered bow was important. The wider disruption mattered even more. A cruiser falling out of line created space and confusion. A second cruiser responding to her changed the local balance. The following ships then encountered new courses and uncertain targets. The American carriers gained distance during those reactions. Their aircraft gained repeated opportunities to attack. The remaining escorts gained time to prepare. Evans did not need to predict every consequence. A battlefield decision rarely provides that luxury. He needed a plausible mechanism connecting action to survival. The mechanism was straightforward: close the range, launch torpedoes, force the enemy to turn, use smoke and weather to escape if possible. Johnston's survival was part of the plan. Evans withdrew after launching rather than continuing toward the battleships. He sought the rain squall and attempted to rejoin the screen. That detail matters. The attack was not designed as a one-way gesture. It became fatal because later damage and further combat removed every route out. Evans' choice was aggressive. It was also grounded in the capabilities of his ship and the pressure of the moment. He did not possess the power to stop center force. He found the power to interrupt it. The story of Johnston has often been compressed into a heroic charge. That description captures the danger. It can also hide the tactical reasoning that made the attack effective. Evans did more than point his ship toward larger guns. He selected the leading cruiser column. He used rain to shorten the exposed approach. He fired guns while closing, then launched a full torpedo spread. After launching, he turned away. He sought concealment and attempted repairs. Later attacks followed, changing threats near the carriers. This sequence shows adaptation rather than a single continuous charge. Johnston performed several roles during the battle. She became a torpedo attacker, smoke maker, gun platform, and moving shield. The surviving record contains uncertainties. Smoke, rain, rapid maneuvering, and overlapping attacks complicated identification. American crews sometimes named the wrong Japanese target. Japanese reports also contained errors. Ships claimed victories that did not match American losses. Observers misidentified escort carriers. Destroyers and aircraft. The torpedo damage to Kumano is widely attributed to Johnston. The timing and geometry support that conclusion, yet precise reconstruction remains difficult in such a confused engagement. Other damage claims require similar caution. A 5-inch shell striking a cruiser does not always reveal which ship fired it. Aircraft from several carrier groups attacked the same targets. Later accounts sometimes combine these actions into a clean narrative. The actual battle offered no such clarity. Participants saw fragments separated by smoke and distance. This uncertainty does not weaken the central analysis. Johnston launched torpedoes into the leading Japanese advance. Kumano was struck and forced out of position. The cruiser column reacted. The American carriers gained time. Those outcomes are more secure than every individual claim of damage. Another simplification describes Kurita's withdrawal as fear caused by one destroyer. That explanation turns a command decision into a legend. It ignores the information available on Yamato. Kurita faced continuous air attacks. He had lost contact with parts of his formation. Several heavy cruisers were damaged or disabled. He believed he had fought a stronger carrier force. He lacked dependable information about American fast carriers. Reports suggested additional targets to the north. Taffy Three's resistance influenced those conditions. It did not create all of them. The distinction preserves both historical accuracy and the significance of Evans' choice. Johnston's attack should not be measured by whether it single-handedly decided the battle. No destroyer possessed that capacity. Its effect came through interaction with many other actions. Howell's attack added torpedo pressure. Heermann forced battleships to maneuver. Samuel B. Roberts engaged cruisers at close range. Carrier pilots repeatedly returned over the Japanese ships. Some landed elsewhere, rearmed and attacked again. Smoke and weather repeatedly changed visibility. Each element increased uncertainty. Together they made a weak force appear difficult to finish. Kurita's original expectation of a rapid victory disappeared. The human cost was severe. Johnston carried more than 300 officers and sailors. Only about 140 were ultimately rescued. Evans was among those lost. His actions later received the Medal of Honor. The award recognized leadership and combat beyond normal expectations. Recognition can encourage hindsight. Because Evans became a celebrated figure, every choice may appear inevitably correct. That is not how the decision looked at sunrise. An immediate attack could have failed before the torpedoes launched. Johnston might have sunk without changing a Japanese course. Waiting for coordination could also have produced a stronger attack. Evans chose without knowing which possibility history would preserve. His decision deserves attention because it matched a real tactical opportunity. It does not require a myth of certainty. The records reveal something more useful than certainty. A small ship found one temporary advantage against a stronger force. Its captain used that advantage before it vanished. The battle also reveals why stronger forces can lose tactical efficiency. Center force held a massive advantage in guns, armor, speed, and numbers. Those advantages were real. They were not automatically available at every moment. Firepower required identification. It required stable range estimates. It required clear firing lanes and coordinated movement. Taffy Three interfered with each requirement. Smoke concealed the carriers. Rain divided the battlefield into temporary pockets of visibility. Aircraft forced Japanese lookouts to search the sky. Torpedoes forced ships to abandon favorable courses. Aggressive escorts became urgent targets inside the gun line. Johnston's first attack reached this system at a sensitive moment. Kurita had ordered a general pursuit while his formation was still changing. His ships accelerated according to local position rather than one controlled plan. The fastest cruisers moved ahead. Battleships and destroyers became separated from them. Japanese firepower remained enormous but increasingly dispersed. Evans exploited that separation without fully understanding it. He attacked the leading element rather than the entire fleet. A destroyer could threaten one cruiser column even when it could not threaten center force equally. This local concentration mattered. For several minutes, Johnston placed all 10 torpedoes against a limited section of the advance. Kumano and nearby ships had to react immediately. The resulting turns affected ships behind them. Formation disruption then spread beyond the original target. A local attack produced consequences across the pursuit. The same mechanism appeared during later American attacks. A torpedo spread against battleships forced changes far beyond its destructive range. The ships lost time and position while avoiding possible hits. Aircraft achieved similar effects. A bomb that missed could still interrupt anti-aircraft fire or maneuver. An aircraft without ordnance could still appear dangerous during its dive. These actions did not make ineffective weapons magically powerful. Their value came from the decisions they imposed. The Japanese captains could not know in advance which threat would strike. This is where underestimation reversed. Kurita initially possessed the initiative. His force had reached an exposed American group by surprise. Taffy Three appeared weak because it was weak. Its carriers lacked armor and speed. Its escorts lacked heavy guns. Yet weakness encouraged the Japanese ships to pursue rapidly. That pursuit stretched their formation. The Americans then attacked the separated elements with every available means. The stronger force began reacting. The weaker force began shaping time and direction. Neither condition remained complete, but the balance had shifted. Johnston's action illustrates this shift at the smallest useful scale. Evans could not determine Kurita's final objective. He could determine what Kumano faced during the next several minutes. That limited control was enough. It interrupted the most dangerous local movement. It also preserved options for ships farther south. Battlefield decisions often work through these narrow windows. A commander rarely controls the entire outcome. He controls one course, one weapon release, or one short interval. The quality of the choice depends on how that interval connects to the larger danger. Evans connected Johnston as torpedoes to the Japanese closing speed. He attacked the movement threatening the carriers. The later outcome depended on many participants. It also depended on Kurita's interpretation of incomplete information. Nothing about the American survival was inevitable. Had center force maintained formation, the result might have been different. Had the smoke cleared earlier, Japanese gunfire might have become more accurate. Had Johnston waited, Kumano might have reached a better firing position. These possibilities cannot be proven. They identify the pressure surrounding the real decision. Evans had to act before uncertainty disappeared. He used uncertainty as cover, then he made it spread. By the afternoon, the surviving ships of Taffy Three were moving away from Samar. The immediate surface danger had passed. The cost remained visible across the formation. Gambier Bay had sunk under Japanese gunfire. Hole and Samuel B. Roberts had also gone down. Johnston rested beneath the Philippine Sea. The escort carrier St. Lo was later struck during a kamikaze attack. She sank after internal explosions. Other carriers carried damage from shells and aircraft. The surviving crews had not won through one weapon or one commander. They survived through overlapping resistance. Every remaining capability was used more than once. Carrier aircraft became bombers, scouts, and distractions. Destroyers became torpedo attackers and smoke screens. Destroyer escorts confronted cruisers at ranges their designers never intended. Johnston's role began with one immediate choice. Evans saw the Japanese advance before receiving an attack order. He decided that waiting would surrender the most valuable minutes. His logic rested on 4 facts available from the bridge. The carriers were slow. Johnston still had speed. Her torpedoes could force a turn. Everything else remained uncertain. Evans did not know Kurita's intentions. He did not know whether American reinforcements would arrive. He could not know that Japanese observers had misidentified Taffy Three. He could not predict the damage to Kumano. He could not know center force would eventually withdraw. The decision was therefore neither prophecy nor desperation. It was a choice made inside severe limits. Evans matched a temporary capability to the most urgent threat. Johnston's attack did not destroy the Japanese fleet. It did not independently save the Leyte landings. It did something smaller and immediately necessary. It broke the leading cruiser column's rhythm. It forced ships to maneuver. It bought time for a wider defense to form. Those minutes allowed Sprague to launch aircraft and organize his escorts. They allowed smoke to thicken across the battlefield. They allowed other attacks to reach Japanese ships from new directions. Each delay made Kurita's information less reliable. Each aggressive response made the American force appear stronger. Each damaged cruiser increased the risk of continuing toward Leyte. When Kurita finally withdrew, his decision reflected many pressures. Losses, air attack, faulty reports, fatigue, and uncertainty all contributed. The resistance off Samar had intensified every one of them. This is why Evans's first turn matters. Its importance cannot be measured only by the torpedo hit on Kumano. The decision changed what both forces could do next. The Japanese could no longer pursue without reacting. The Americans could begin building a defense from scattered actions. Initiative shifted before the balance of firepower changed. Johnston was eventually overwhelmed. Her loss does not erase the calculation behind the attack, nor does her courage remove the need for careful analysis. Evans accepted a terrible risk. He accepted it before knowing whether anyone else would follow, but he did not attack because courage made consequences irrelevant. He attacked because consequences had become immediate. Every minute of an unopposed pursuit brought the cruisers closer to the carriers. Every minute of disruption offered another chance for survival. At Samar, the weaker force could not choose the battlefield. It could choose which decisions the stronger force had to make. Evans used one destroyer to present a torpedo problem. That problem became a turn. The turn became delay. Delay became confusion. Confusion became survival. Before anyone ordered it, Johnston had changed the battle's direction. Mota Seo. Why battle off USS Johnston? Why did USS Johnston charge a vastly superior Japanese fleet before receiving an attack order? This documentary examines Commander Ernest Evans' decision during the battle off Samar on October 25, 1944, facing 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers. Evans used Johnston's speed, smoke, guns, and torpedoes to disrupt the Japanese pursuit of Taffy Three. The story reconstructs what Evans and Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita knew at the time. It explores the attack on the cruiser Kumano, the defensive actions of the American escorts, Japan's mistaken identification of the escort carriers, and the uncertainty surrounding Kurita's withdrawal. Rather than treating the battle as a simple heroic legend, the documentary separates established evidence from later interpretation. It shows how torpedo threats, smoke, aircraft, weather, damaged formations, and incomplete intelligence transformed a severe imbalance in firepower into a crisis of command. This documentary uses AI-assisted historical reconstructions for visual illustration. The black and white images shown in the video are not authentic archival photographs unless specifically identified. The narration is based on historical records and authoritative sources. Timeline. Japanese battleships appear. 03:35 Evans faces 3 choices. 07:10 Johnston begins the attack. 10:45 Torpedoes against Kumano. 14:20 the American screen strikes back. 18 Kurita's formation fractures. 21:35 Johnston defends the carriers. 25:15 the destroyer is overwhelmed. 28:45 why Kurita turned away. 32:15 myth versus the records. 35:30 how a weaker force seized initiative. 38:30 the decision that bought time. Taffy Three Ernest Evans, Leyte Gulf, Naval History, World War II. CO video tags. Battle off Samar, U.S. Johnston, Ernest Evans, Taffy Three, Battle of Leyte Gulf, World War D documentary, Naval Warfare History, Imperial Japanese Navy, United States Navy. Takeo Kurita, thumbnail, text thumbnail tiếng Anh, he attacked first, nghĩa tiếng Việt, ông ấy tấn công trước, yêu cầu tổng hợp. Thumbnail tái dựng khoảnh khắc USS Johnston, chủ động đổi hướng và lao về phía đội hình Nhật Bản ngoài khơi Samar. Hero chính là USS Johnston nhìn từ góc thấp phía trước mạn trái, đủ lớn để nhận diện rõ trên màn hình di động. Phía xa là tuần dương hạm Kumano cùng bóng dáng những thiết giáp hạm Nhật Bản, tạo chênh lệch quy mô rõ rệt. Một mũi tên trắng vẽ tay duy nhất chỉ chính xác vào USS Johnston và hướng tiến công ngược chiều đội hình Mỹ đang rút lui. Khối chữ nhật đỏ đậm đặt ở góc trên bên trái, không che tàu hoặc đường tiến công. Không dùng chân dung Ernest Evans làm điểm khoanh vì bằng chứng thị giác trung tâm là hướng di chuyển táo bạo của Johnston. Prompt thumbnail hoàn chỉnh. Create a finished high-click WI YouTube thumbnail in a 16:9 composition. Depict the battle off Samar on the morning of October 25, 1944, as a full-color historical reconstruction with very high image quality. Show us Johnston, an authentic Fletcher-class United States Navy destroyer, as the large foreground hero from a dramatic low front port perspective. The destroyer is turning northwest at high speed and charging toward the Japanese center force through rough Philippine seawater. Show realistic bow spray, a dense smoke trail, wet gray painted steel, authentic weathering, and clearly believable 5-inch gun mounts. In the middle distance, show the Japanese heavy cruiser Kumano leading a scattered cruiser column. Place the massive silhouettes of Japanese battleships farther behind her, including a historically believable Yamato-class silhouette. Make the extreme difference in scale immediately understandable without overcrowding the frame. Use broken tropical rain clouds, localized rain squalls, shell splashes, smoke, and restrained morning sunlight. Create strong depth, crisp subject separation, rich but believable contrast. And natural war documentary color grading. The scene must resemble an exceptionally detailed colorized historical photograph, not a modern movie still. Place one bold, dark red, rectangular text box in the upper left corner. Inside the red box, write exactly "He attacked first" in large, white, uppercase, heavy condensed sans serif lettering. Arrange the wording across 2 or 3 clean lines for immediate mobile readability. Use only a very subtle dark shadow or thin dark edge around the white letters. Include exactly one thick white hand-drawn sketch arrow with a subtle dark edge. The arrow must point directly toward USS Johnston and emphasize her movement toward the Japanese ships. Do not add a circle second arrow, portrait cutout, additional label, map graphic, or extra text. Maintain realistic anatomy for any barely visible sailors and accurate construction for every vessel. Show coherent perspective, believable waves, authentic naval paint. Realistic smoke, consistent shadows, and physically credible shell splashes. No black and white thumbnail style, sepia thumbnail style, flat illustration, anime, digital painting. Game render, posterized CGI, excessive HDR, neon colors, artificial glow, or obvious modern cinematic grading. No low detailed faces, waxy skin, warped vehicles, malformed hulls. Duplicated ships, duplicated sailors, extra fingers, melted metal, impossible gun arrangements, random letters, misspelled text, watermarks, logos, modern objects, gore, bodies, or graphic injuries. The final result must look historically believable, clean, vivid, cinematic, highly realistic, and free from AI artifacts.